黑暗必须要跪拜在神的面前。
It must bow to its knees.
他必须要谦卑屈膝，甚至
So that God's light can be shone.
在上帝的荣光的当中，他必须要发现他自己是不行的，他要
And
被他
God
跪拜
can
下。
reveal that He's greater.
因为上帝要证明他是更大的。
Amen?
Amen.
Many of you don't know me.
很多人不认识我，
You haven't had the pleasure.
非常棒，今天大家有这个荣幸可以认识我。
You know Zhenya, but you don't know me.
你们可能要认识真雅，可是你们可能不认识我。
And so I just want to share a little bit about my life.
所以我想跟大家简单分享一下我的生命。
When I was growing up, my parents were missionaries.
我从小我的父母亲就是宣教师。
And so when I was 8 years old,
当我8岁的时候，
we were living in Uruguay.
我们在乌拉圭，我们在乌拉圭，我们住在乌拉圭。
Uruguay. And so I have 3 older sisters and a younger brother.
我有3个姐姐跟一个弟弟。
The first month that we lived in Uruguay,
我在乌拉圭第1年的时候，
our house burned.
第1个月的时候，我们的房子就被烧毁了。
A man knocked on the door before this and tried to come in and rape my sister.
在我们的家里被焚烧之前，有个人想要冲进我们的家里，想要强暴我的姐姐。
We ended up in an anti-American parade downtown and almost got killed.
我们在大城市的时候，甚至差点会被因为反美的这种情绪的人所杀害。
All within 1 month.
就在1个月发生这件事情。
Welcome to the mission field.
欢迎来到宣教的事工。
Then within a few months after that,
之后的几个月，
I don't know if you know, Uruguay is considered an atheist nation to this day.
乌拉圭到今天仍然是一个无神论的国家。
But God has raised up many powerful churches in that nation.
但这个国家上帝已经兴起许多非常有力量的教会。
But back then, when I was 8 years old, the darkness was great.
但当我8岁的时候，那个好几年前的时候，那个国家充满了非常深厚浓厚的黑暗势力。
And within a few months, my mother noticed that I was very sick.
在之后的几个月，发现我的母亲突然发现我生病了。
She would send me to school and I would have a fever.
当我去学校上课的时候，我就会发高烧。
And the teacher would send me home by lunchtime.
然后教会在老师在中午的时候就把我送回家。
So I stayed home from school for a few days.
所以我就在家里请病假。
And then when the fever left, my mom would send me back.
所以当这个高烧退了之后，我又回去学校。
But then I would get a fever again.
但是我又会再次到学校之后，我又会得高烧。
So they brought me to the doctors.
他们带我到医院，
They would do all these tests.
他们开始做一些测验。
Still to this day,
到了今天，
I hate needles.
我讨厌针筒，
Don't like needles.
不喜欢针筒，
I will never get a tattoo
不可能去做任何的刺青，
because that's a needle.
因为它是针筒。
No. So anyway, I became very, very sick.
所以我那时候非常的病重。
So finally, my family had to go on vacation to Paraguay.
因此呢，后来我的父母亲决定要带我们出去走一走到另外一个国家。
And we were there for 1 week staying with some missionaries.
我们到另外一个国家去那边休息呢，跟另外一个宣教士的家庭住在一起。
And I got so sickly, my mom and dad had to put me in the hospital.
因为我非常的病重，所以我必须要住院。
And it was a Nazarene hospital,
那是个拿撒勒医院，
a Christian hospital.
是一个基督徒的医院。
And the doctors did all of these tests,
那医生就做了许多的测验，
sent the results to the United States.
然后就把结果传到美国。
And when the results came back, they said, your daughter has Collagen's disease.
当这个结果回来的时候呢，我不是很清楚这个疾病是什么。
It's a blood disease,
是一个关于
and
血
it's like leukemia.
有点像血癌这样的状况。
And my mother said, well, what can you do for my daughter?
那我的母亲就说，那医生你该怎么办？
They said, oh, there's no cure.
他说没有办法治
They。said, there's nothing we can do for your daughter.
他说我们无法帮助你的女儿。
By then, I had lost all this weight.
那个时候我变得非常的瘦。
I wish I had a little bit of that now.
我希望现在还是可以减一点
And
重
my hair was falling out.
那我的头发怎么
Not
掉
from
了？
chemo or anything like that. There wasn't anything they could do, but my hair, I was so sickly.
不是因为化疗，而是在化疗之前，在治疗之前，我的头发就掉光了。
And so the doctor said, there's nothing we can do,
所以医生说我们无法做任何的事情，
and your daughter will die.
你的女儿将会死。
Well, my father had to go back to Uruguay and took the family home.
一直当我的父亲要回到乌拉圭的时候，
And my mother stayed with me
那我的母亲就在医院当中，
in Paraguay in this hospital.
就在另外一个国家。
Finally, one day, my mother called up the missionaries there
有一天，我的母亲就打电话给当地的宣教师，
and said, I need for you to book 2 tickets, get 2 airline tickets. I'm taking my daughter home to Uruguay.
那他就说，我需要你帮我买2张机票，我要带我的女儿回到乌拉圭。
And the missionary said, oh, you can't do that. Your daughter's too sick. She can't get on a plane.
那我们的同工就说，不行，你的女儿太重了，你不可能把她放到飞机上面。
And my mother said, my daughter will live. She will not die.
我的母亲说，我的女儿将会活着，她不会死。
This doctor can't help her anymore.
这个医生无法再帮助她，
Only God can help her.
但是上帝会帮助她。
So we're going home.
所以我们要回家。
So the missionary had to come to the hospital
所以那个宣教士们就到
and
了
pick
医
me
院，
out of the bed and carry me.
然后把我从病房当中
And
抱起来，
they got me into a plane.
让我能够搭上飞机。
And so the plane took off and we headed home to Uruguay.
于是呢，我们的飞机就起飞了，就朝乌拉圭飞往。
In that airplane,
在飞机上，
I still remember
我仍然可以记得，
I was very sick,
我非常的病重。
but my mother said to me,
但我的母亲对我说，
she said, Sandy, there are some times
她说 Sandy， 有时候
when you have to stomp on the devil.
你必须要踩在魔鬼之上。
And I said, okay.
我说哦好。
And she said, honey, I want you to stomp on the devil.
她说孩子，我要你现在就践踏撒旦。
So she took off my seatbelt
所以她把我的安全带打开，
and she took off her seatbelt
她把她安全带打开，
and she helped me to stand
她帮我让我
and
可
we
以站起来，
said, in Jesus' name,
然后说奉主耶稣的名，
devil, you're under my feet.
撒旦你被我践踏在脚下。
And then my mother said, I just collapsed and fell in the seat.
然后那个时候我之后我就倒在椅子上。
An hour later, we arrived in Uruguay.
几个小时之后，我们在乌拉圭抵达。
And the plane emptied and my father came to carry me.
然后我们下了飞机呢，我的父亲就来接我们。
They took me home in our car.
他带我回家，我们坐在车子里面。
And my mother was so worried about me, she just wanted to get me in bed.
那我的母亲非常担心我，所以她希望我可以赶快上床休息。
I hadn't eaten in weeks.
我1个礼拜都没有吃东西，
I just had needles in my arms giving me IV.
我只有点滴。
And so I got home,
所以我回到家，
and my dad carried me in the house,
我的父亲抱着我回到家。
and my oldest sister had made a roast beef dinner.
那我的姐姐们就为我做了一个非常丰盛的晚餐。
Mashed potatoes and gravy.
这个马铃薯泥，
Green beans.
然后豆子，
And then chocolate cake.
还有巧克力蛋糕。
And so when we walked in the house, they had a banner that said, "Welcome home, Sandy."
到家的时候，他们做了一个很大的一个 banner， 说欢迎回家 ，Sandy。
And my mother said, "Oh, Debbie, Sandy can't eat anything. I'm sorry, honey, she won't be able to eat
我的母
anything."
亲说：“哦，孩子，谢谢你们，可是 Sandy 无法吃。”
And I raised my head off of my father was carrying me. I raised my head up and said, "Ooh, that looks good."
我的父亲抱着我，我头都抬起来说：“哦，这
And
看
it's
起来
been
很好吃。
good for the last 40 years. Praise God. ”
从那个之后，
And I sat down and ate roast beef,
于是我开始就坐下来吃东
mashed
西，
potatoes,
吃这些美好的食
green
物，
beans.
吃这些豆子、
And
马
then
铃
my
薯
mom
泥。
said she must go to bed.
我妈就说她必须要去休息了。
And my sister said, "But I made her chocolate cake."
然后我的姐妹说：“可是我为她做了巧克
And
力
I
蛋
said,
糕。”
"My favorite. I'll have some chocolate cake too."
我就说：“这是我最喜欢巧克力蛋糕，是我要吃一
So I
个。
had chocolate cake, ”
所以我吃了蛋糕，
went to bed,
然后我就休息，
and my fever broke.
然后我的发烧就退了。
The next day I had no fever.
隔天我就退烧，
Within a few weeks, I was able to go back to school,
再过来的几个礼拜，我可以开始回到学校上课，
half day,
上半天课，
and then 3/4 of a day,
然后2/3的课程，
until I had enough strength and I could go to school the whole day.
到最后我可以拥有所有的力量，可以每天去上课。
I learned when I was 8 years old. Sometimes you gotta stomp on the devil.
我8岁学校一个功课，就是有时候我必须要。
I learned when I was 8 years old that Jesus is
我8岁的时候，我
greater
学习到耶稣是比
in the darkness.